Okay, so you discarded 2 of my cards, ripped my draw for the turn, and now I have 4 cards staring down your 4 negates.
Yeah, pretty much.
Damn, this really is a moment.
What is going on, guys? Rogue TCG here, bringing another Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG deck profile. You all voted for it, so here I am providing. Here is Merlantean. Now, I can officially say Merlantean and not Mermail Atlantean because they are now officially combined in archetype. They are now one and the same, at least with the new support. The new support is one and the same. And this deck is super cool, at least if you're the one playing it. If you're the opponent, boohoo bitch, it sucks to suck. I mean, I don't know what to say. You should have opened a hand trap. But this deck is really cool. The idea of the deck is that every single card in this deck either wants to be sent to graveyard to activate a water monster's effect, or sends a card to graveyard to activate its effect and it's a water monster. You know, pretty simple stuff. Since there is such a large amount of Mermail Atlanteans, we do have to play at high quantities in order to make sure the deck is efficient and consistent. It does mean we have a very small amount of non-engine slots. Of course, you can change that out. However, that is going to change the deck's play style somewhat. But this deck is really powerful, and it has a really powerful one-card combo with Deep Sea Diva. I'm going to be showing it to you at the very end of the video, so you can skip to that if you want to skip to it. If you know what the profile is generally going to look like, you can skip to that and see the combo. Otherwise, I'm going to be showing you the profile. Starting off with our main deck, of course. Starting off, we're on triple Deep Sea Diva. On normal, it allows us to special summon a Sea Serpent from our deck. It's a level 3 or lower, although we only really are going to be special summoning 1 off of it, and the 1 target is going to be triple Neptibus, the Atlantean Prince. Now this card has 2 effects. On field, it has an ignition effect where we can activate it for cost, send an Atlantean from deck to graveyard, and then the effect is to add an Atlantean from deck to hand. The cost, of course, is going to trigger our Atlantean. Whatever we choose to send to the graveyard is going to trigger. And all the Atlanteans that we send to the graveyard, they're mandatory triggers, so we have to activate them when they are sent to the graveyard, which is a little bit unfortunate for planning out our combo, but it's fine. And then this card also has another effect. If this card is sent from the hand or field to the graveyard to activate a water monster's effect, I believe it also counts from deck, although there isn't really anything that can really send this guy from deck unless we're talking about in the extra deck. If it's sent to the graveyard to activate a water monster's effect, we can bring back an Atlantean from our graveyard other than himself, which is very important for our combo. Speaking of Atlanteans that we want to be sent to graveyard, here is triple copies of Atlantean Dragoons, the old staple card. This card, pretty simple. The only effect that's really relevant on it is when it's sent to graveyard to activate a water monster's effect, we can add a Sea Serpent from our deck to our hand. Now that's a mandatory trigger. That's always going to be Chain Link 1. Just letting you know, you do have to say, Chain Link 1, I'm going to goon. So that is something that you have to do, but you know, it comes with the territory. It comes with the territory of gooning. But we are also on 2 copies of Atlantean Heavy Infantry. This card's effect, when it's sent to graveyard to activate a water monster's effect, it will pop a face-up card on field on your opponent's side. So we don't have to pop our own cards, or rather we can't pop our own cards, but this is a mandatory trigger even if they have nothing, so keep that in mind, I guess. And also, while this card's on field, we can normal summon in addition to our other normal summon. So really cool to get at least that additional normal summon if we need to have it, although it's not always useful. But this card being interaction, even when it's discarded, be able to pop a card is really critical. That's it for all of our old Atlantean cards, although Deep Sea Diva isn't really an Atlantean. Now let's talk about our new stuff. We're on triple copies of Mermail Shadow Squad and triple copies of Abyshrine the Atlantean Spirit. Try and realign those a little bit. Shadow Squad, when sent to graveyard to activate a water monster's effect, will be special summoning either a Mermail or an Atlantean out of our deck. Epic stuff there, to be honest. And then Abyshrine actually doesn't have an effect when sent to graveyard to activate a water monster's effect. So there's that. This card on field allows us to discard a card out of our hand for cost to make all monsters that have a level become level 7 on our side of the field. Really great for making freebie 7s and makes it so we don't actually have to really do too much math. And then Abyshrine, while it's in our hand, we can tribute it as well as either a water that's on our field or in our hand, being an Atlantean or a Mermail water specifically, to special summon a level 7 fish, sea serpent, or aqua straight out of our deck or add it to our hand. And this card has a secret effect in the graveyard during our opponent's turn. Quick effect, we can banish it in order to discard a card for cost and then draw a card, which is going to trigger something, let's say for example, like a heavy infantry that we add to our hand at the end of our combo. So that allows us to basically have a Dryad whenever we want and get a card back for that pop. So both of these are incredible, and we are playing 3 a copy of each. We're on 1 copy of Mermail Abyss Pike and 1 copy of Mermail Abyss Gund. Abyss Pike on normal or special will allow us to discard a water in order to add a level 3 water from our deck to our hand. And then Gund, when discarded, allows us to reborn a Mermail, and this one's a once per turn, as well as Pike being a once per turn. Pike is really important for its star count. It's a level 4 Mermail. I can discard a card to add a card, which is really critical, and we are playing 1 because, again, this is necessary in the combo, as well as Gund. They're both necessary. We're on 2 apiece of Mermail Abyss Schmeglo, and then 3 copies of Mermail Abyss Teus. Schmeglo has the effect where we can pitch 2 waters out of our hand to special summon it from our hand. And then when it's special summoned in that way specifically, we get to add an Abyss spell trap from deck to hand. And Mermail Abyss Teus allows us to pitch 1 water in order to special summon it. And then when summoned that way, we can add a Mermail that's a level 4 or lower from our deck to our hand. Really important effect on this one, especially given that even though these ones are the only ones that have Mermail in their text for Mermail Shadow Guard, this one's also a Mermail, so this is really important. But we're on those, although Megalo does have a secret effect that people tend to forget, at least the people who are now playing it. This card allows us to tribute a water on our side of the field in order to gain 2 attacks during each battle phase. Now, that might seem a little bit underwhelming, especially given we pitched 2 cards for it, although we can bring it right out with Abyss Shrine, and 2 attacks with 2400 attack is 4800 right there. And then once we get to our cards that buff our cards, and then our equips, the thing that this thing searches, that also gives a huge buff for our Mermails, like this card gets really big really quick. And the fact that it can attack twice does mean sometimes you just kill your opponent on the spot. We are on 3 copies of Deep Sea Minstrel. This card allows us to discard it and another water from our hand in order to look at our opponent's hand, banish 1 card that we get to choose from their hand until the end of the turn. We're playing 3 copies of this, which is very unorthodox, I'd like to say. I'm playing 3 copies of this because this deck loses to 2 cards. 1, Dimension Shifter. This deck has no game against Dimension Shifter in the slightest. We can't even activate our cards because they have to send to graveyard, period. So we get shifted, we literally kind of have to pass. And then the other card is Droll and Lockbird. Droll and Lockbird, we can play around. If we max out on Minstrel, if we see the Minstrel, the first action that we take in our turn is going Minstrel, pitch itself and whatever, look at our opponent's hand, rip the most dangerous looking hand trap right out of it, and now we know what we can and can't play around, so we can build our board accordingly. There's also a secret effect on this card. If it's special summoned, we can mill 3, put 1 back. It's not especially too relevant, although it can come up if you run out of like Atlanteans in your deck, and you can just start putting them back onto the bottom of your deck. So we are on triple Minstrel just to avoid hand traps because we're pretty much all gas. We're on 1 Lapis Dragon. This is a Sea Serpent, as well as, keep in mind, Minstrel is also a Sea Serpent and a tuner, so we can access some weird synchros that way, as well as this is also a tuner. And this is just when added to hand, except by drawing it, we get to special summon it. And since it's a Sea Serpent, we're able to add it with Atlantean Dragoons, which is now a once per turn to add a Sea Serpent from deck to hand. So, really powerful there. This combined with Neptibus is also a Brionac, which is very funny in this deck. We're on 3 copies of Ice Jade Ran Igraine. We can pitch a water to special summon this card from our hand and then make a level 3 token that's a non-tuner. And then we are able to just immediately make a Synchro 10 with them, which is really nice and really relevant actually, because it allows us to insulate our plays when we're going second. And then lastly, the bad card here, Muin Glacia, the Elemental Lord. It is a Sea Serpent, so we are able to search it whenever we need to with Atlantean Dragoons. We can only special summon this card if we have exactly 5 waters in our grave, not more, not less. And then when summoned that way, our opponent has to randomly discard 2 cards. If this card leaves the field, we have to skip our next battle phase. Oh no! This card is really good. It's also really toxic, and if Mermail got more support and starts seeing more representation, I wouldn't be surprised to see this card banned. This card is really stupid. Now onto our Abyss spell traps. We're on one of the new one, Abyss Ting of the Triana. This card allows us to basically like Monster Reborn, and then when I was in Graveyard, it's a bad Pot of Avarice where it just shuffles 3 back for nothing. Although shuffling 3 back in this deck can also help us modulate the number of waters in our graveyard from Moon Glacier if we're not doing like a streamlined combo and we're just kind of winging it. And then for our other Abyss scales, we're on one Abyss scale of the Mizuchi and one Abyss scale of the Kraken. Mizuchi gives us an 800 boost and negates spells. Kraken gives us a 400 boost and negates monster effects. Now these cards are very interesting. Mizuchi and Kraken are both very interesting in the fact that they negate at point of resolution. These are cards that do not activate to negate. They will just meet the condition, send themselves to the graveyard, and negate the card. So when our opponent activates a spell, let's say for example a Dark Ruler No More on your end board, which is primarily monsters that will negate stuff, and we have a Mizuchi back there protecting our board, at point of resolution of the Dark World, Mizuchi is going to recognize that our opponent has activated their first spell in the turn, it's going to send itself to the graveyard, and that card is going to be negated, even though we are not able to respond to it. Or even a card like Super Polymerization, where our opponent was going to activate it and no one can respond to that. Too bad no one is responding to it, because Mizuchi is just going to negate it by itself. Same thing with Kraken, except this is for on-field monster effects. Keep in mind these are only for on-field effects, they will not negate graveyard or hand effects. But those are the Abyss scales that we're playing. We're playing a lot of them just because we are very capable of searching them both on our turn and our opponent's turn, as well as putting them on field during our turn and our opponent's turn. We're on one copy of Triple Tactics Thrust and one copy of Triple Tactics Talents. These are probably incorrect here, to be completely honest. I would recommend playing a card like Deep Sea Aria if you're having issues with finding your waters, or if you need hand traps, you can play whichever hand traps you feel like would go well in this slot, as long as they aren't light, earth, or wind. And now you might say, why not light, earth, or wind? That's because we are playing triple copies of Dominus Impulse. This card locks us out of activating lights, earths, and winds, which allows us to basically auto-win in the Mimighoul matchup, funny enough, since they give us the monsters and we can't activate the flip effects after we impulse. Very funny, very comedy. But also, we are a water deck that doesn't actually really have a good hand trap to use, Impulse being probably the best one because we can control monsters to activate Impulse out of our hand. This card is very good right now, and we are playing 3 copies. If we weren't playing 3 copies of this, I would recommend playing Fularos. But if you open both, then you kind of have to choose which one you're doing, this one or this one. So not really the best decision to have to make. But that's the main deck. That's going to be a solid 40 cards. Now let's talk about our extra. In our extra deck, we're on one Marincest Coral Anemone. This card allows us to bring back a 1500 or less attack point monster from our graveyard, and then we're locked into waters. There's a couple very interesting ones. In our mainline combo, when we are doing our plays, we want to be bringing back our Mermail Shadow Squad to get that on-field effect to discard a card and make things level 7. But during our other combos, if we need to kind of like freestyle things, we are able to bring back an Ice Jade Ran Agrine because it's a level 7 with 1500 attack if we need a quick 7 on the go. So there's a lot of different options to be had with Coral Anemone, and I could even see this being ran at 2 in this list. We're also on one Mermail Abyss Lacia. This card during our opponent's turn, quick effect, we can discard a card from our hand to add a Mermail from our deck to our hand. This will trigger any cards that was sent to graveyard for cost. So when in reference to the extra deck, I want you to keep in mind that likely we are going to have a heavy infantry in hand because during the end of our turn combo, we're always pretty much going to want to search this card if we haven't opened it. And again, let me just remind you, if this card's sent to graveyard by a card effect, we get a pop a face-up card on field. So it's just Trident. And this card, if it's sent to the graveyard by an opponent's card, we're able to send a water from our deck to the graveyard for cost in order to special summon any water out of our graveyard in defense position. This is a super funny line of text to be put on this because basically if your opponent wants to run it over, they have to give you so much advantage where if they don't kill you right then and there, you're probably going to win on the crackback unless they set up an unbreakable board. But this basically turns this into a Trident and then a Rhoda, which is really cool. This also buffs whatever it points to, so it's relevant for Abyss Megalo reasons. And then lastly, we're on one Mermail King Neptabyss. Keep in mind, not an Atlantean. This is a Mermail, not an Atlantean. Very, very stupid how that's not an Atlantean, but you know, sometimes it be like that. So this card protects everything it points to that's a water from being targeted by card effects. Each turn, whenever we send a water to the graveyard to activate a water's effect, at point of after that effect resolves, we are able to go Neptabyss to either take an Abyss spell trap from our deck. So let me just pull them out real quick. We're able to take one of these 3 cards and either add it to our hand. So the one we want to add is going to be Triana, or we're able to immediately equip it onto Neptabyss himself. So that's either Mizuchi or Kraken. So when paired with a card like Abyss Shrine, the new one, where it can quick effect discard a card, draw a card during our opponent's turn, even though we've already gotten one on our own turn, during our opponent's turn, we're able to discard something like a heavy infantry, draw a new card, then trigger Neptabyss, which will then grab one of these 2 out of deck, whichever you want in that moment, because we're on our opponent's turn at this point, to just attach it onto here just to get an extra negate of whatever you could want. So really cool stuff there, like really neat interaction. And even though this deck is very light on link monsters, like our links are very powerful, and I could even see reason for playing multiple, or even playing something like World Sea Dragon's Atlantis, because it is a water and we can play under that water lock. But that's it for our links. Now let's go on to our synchros. These synchros are probably incorrect, but it is completely up to your decision what you want to be playing. I'm playing one Brionac Dragon of the Ice Barrier, able to pitch any number of cards to target that many cards on the field and bounce onto hand. Allows us to OTK really easy. It's a water monster that discards for card costs. Triggers everything we could want it to trigger. It's really funny when it does happen. And if we choose to play Fularos instead of Impulse, we're able to fill up our hand during our opponent's turn if we draw it, and then make Brio and bounce their entire board, which is nice. We are on one Dragite for a spell negate, one Deep Sea Prima Donna, which allows us to basically target one of our opponent's banished cards, return it to their hand, and then we can special summon any level 4 monster, Sea Serpent from our deck, I believe. Let me just confirm. Not even Sea Serpent, any level 4 or lower water. So really flexible there, being able to grab us into heavy infantry if we need an additional normal, a Neptabyss if we have a Neptabyss, you know, so on and so forth. This card's really strong. Also, it's a level 7 tuner. Keep that in mind. There's some funny stuff that we can be doing, especially given our next card, which is the funny stuff we could be doing. So next up, we're on one copy of Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier. If you can make it, you're very based and funny, although this is just kind of like a weird include in the deck. Probably actually going to cut this one for Zelantis just because it comes up more frequently. And by frequently, I mean this actually can come up. Well, this one pretty much never comes up, although it is an interesting form of interaction and removal if you can get it off. And then we're on the one Ice Jade Gimmer E-Green. This card is really powerful, being able to out stuff like Floodgates, out the field spells of Tenpai. It's just a really powerful card. If we activate it, our opponent can't destroy our cards with card effects for the rest of the turn, and then they can't banish our cards for the rest of the turn. And then if we activated it in response to an opponent activating a card, we are able to banish the card that they are activating. Which removes a lot of different things for a lot of different decks. So this card is very strong. But that's it for our synchros. And now let's go on to our XEs. We're on one Abyss Dweller to shut off strategies, although this also shuts off our strategy completely too. So if you want to counter this deck, this is a good card. We're on 2 copies of Bahamut Shark, as well as the 2 Froggy Friend, 2 totally awesome for negations. 1 copy of Mermail Abyss Gaios. It's like a whack-ass skill drain, to be completely honest. At quick effect, we can detach a material. Anything that is attack lower than it than our opponent currently controls is negated till the end of turn. And then 1 copy of Water Flamberge. Now, this card is strong. I would say when the new 7 comes out, the one that brings back a monster from the graveyard, you play 2 of this. Right now, I think you only play 1 and 1, although you could probably play 2 and 1 just to make sure this consistently can come on board. But the reason you want it to come all over the board is because that's what it does. You can just, it's like a Dingirsu. If you have a 7 or a Mermail or an Atlantean, I believe, you can just slap them right on top and put all the materials underneath. You can attach 2 materials, bounce up to 3, send a card water from your deck to the graveyard for cost, bounce up to 3 cards your opponent controls, non-targeting, non-destruction, removal. Nice. And then if this card's sent to the graveyard, you can bring back 3 waters from your graveyard. So, interesting stuff there. Very interesting. But that's about it for the deck profile. Now I'm gonna toss you over to look at that combo tutorial. Alrighty, so this is gonna be our 1-card combo. It's just Deep Sea Evo. That's all we need. If our opponent has absolutely nothing, this is all we need. So we're gonna start off. We're gonna normal summon our Deep Sea Diva. We're gonna activate that effect. We're gonna special summon a Nepta Bussy right out of our deck. We're gonna go Bussy effect. We're gonna send Shadow Squad, and then to add the Dragoon, Shadow Squad is then going to trigger here. We're going to be summoning a Pike out of our deck. We're then going to go Pike effect, discard this Goons for cost to add an Abyss Shrine. Then our Goons is going to do its thing. It's going to goon all over, adding a Deep Sea Minstrel. This can really be whatever as long as it's not Moon Glacia. We're going to go Shrine in order to add Mermail Abyss Teus to hand. And then we're going to go Nepta Bussy in order to bring back our Dragoons. We're going to make a Bahamut Shark, and then a neat little interaction here. We're going to detach the Goons to summon a Toad, and then Goons is phrased in such a way, or rather all the Atlanteans are, where when we do this, it is going to trigger. And then we're going to add our Moon Glacia. Now, we are at 4 waters in our graveyard. When we send our Goons, we're going to be at 5, or I mean our Bahamut, but we're just going to go Teus, pitch Minstrel in order to summon itself in order to make it exactly 5. We're going to go Teus, add Gund here, and then we're going to special summon our Moon Glacia. We're going to rip 2 cards out of our hand. They only had 1, but keep in mind at this point our opponent has 3 cards in hand. With this Minstrel, we in theory could have looked at it and ripped a card that they wouldn't want, like Nibiru, out of their hand, although we summon our Toad on summon number 5, so we're already Nibiru proof. So we're going to link off into a Marincess Coral Anemone, and then we're going to go Coral to bring back our Shadow Squad. We're going to go link those 2 off into Nepta Bussy. We're going to go Shadow Squad, pitch our Gund, and then our Neptibus is going to trigger as well as our Gund. Our Gund's going to target our Pike to bring it back. So we're going to bring back our Pike. Neptibus is going to add Triana. Then we are going to XC summon into Gaios, go Triana, bring back Goons. Make another Bahamut. We're going to detach another material off of our Bahamut, because it's not a hard once per turn, being a Dragoons, in order to summon another Totally Awesome, also not once per turn. And then Dragoons is going to add to hand a Heavy Infantry. Now, this is going to be our end board. Now, let's look at what we have. Our opponent's going to have 3 cards in their hand. We have 3 negations right here. Monster, anything, anything. They're going to draw a card for turn, completely fine by us. The moment they draw a card, or they put a card face up on their side of the field, we're going to go Abyss Shrine the Atlantean Spirit, pitch this Heavy Infantry in order to draw a card. Heavy Infantry at resolution is going to trigger, popping a card they control, as well as Neptibus triggering, allowing us to basically equip either the spell negation or the monster negation onto himself to negate that last card that they will have. So we have a pop, we have 3 negations, and then a 4th negation against our opponent's 4-card hand. It might be even less than a 4-card hand because we might have even minstreled, so sure, it'll be more than 4 cards, or I mean, it will be 4 cards, but one of them is going to be like a Nibiru or something that they absolutely just can't use. So this deck I think is super sick. Like, I think this deck is really cool. There is, like I said, there is like that major weakness to Dimensional Shifter where you quite literally cannot win. But there is also another weakness to Droll and Lockbird specifically. I didn't mention it when talking about Minstrel, but Droll and Lockbird does kind of cook the deck because you keep on adding cards from your deck to your hand over and over, because every single thing that you do is going to minus you in some way or another, because you need to send stuff to the graveyard for cost, and that's just going to mean you're going to minus inherently. But this deck is super cool. I'm glad the deck isn't all too expensive. I know cards like Heavy Infantry are starting to go up in price in Gaios. What I'd recommend to people who are looking to pick up the deck is just wait it out. Hopefully they're going to reprint these cards in an OTS pack. in order to make them a bit more accessible to the player base, just because they haven't been reprinted in quite literally almost 10 years. But thank you all so much for watching, if you still are, and I'll be seeing you all later. Oh, and thank you to my one member. I almost forgot. Thank you to my one member. Thank you, Ari. If you want to become a member, stay tuned till the end of the video. I always describe it at the end of all my videos. But that's going to be all. Thank you all so much for watching. Bye-bye. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you wanted to talk to more Yu-Gi-Oh players like yourself, I would highly recommend checking out our Discord server. Link is going to be in the description, as well as the QR code on screen. We do talk somewhat frequently about Yu-Gi-Oh and the current meta, so I would really enjoy to see you there. As well as we do recently now have channel memberships available on our YouTube channel, where we have 3 different tiers. We have Super Supporter at $2 a month, where you get loyalty badges, emojis, guaranteed comment responses, a shout out at the end of every video, as well as access to the members only Discord channel, where you get early sneak peeks at future videos. There is the Giga Supporter at $5 a month, where you have early access to all new videos about a day or two before they go up, as well as all the previous offers. And for $15 a month, we do have our final tier, which is going to be Femboy Fanatic. You get a guaranteed customized video every single month, as well as 1 hour of my time. Could be for anything you'd like. You want a duel? Absolutely. You want me to help build a deck? Absolutely. You want to play some Helldivers? Sure. I'll do anything for an hour once a month. But supporting does help me out quite a lot, and it does help me produce all of these videos. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be seeing y'all later. Bye-bye.